So good morning, Facebook land. It's Caroline Carrington from Jewel in the Lotus Coaching. I am excited to connect with you today. It feels like it's been a little while since I've been back in the Bay to do a Facebook Live with you. And I'm very grateful to each and every one of you that is choosing to join in. Welcome, Nathan. I want to start actually with a chant. This time, believe it or not, I'm going to be chanting in English. Many of you who've studied with me know I normally like to chant in Sanskrit, but I would honestly butcher the Sanskrit, so I'm going to do the chant in English, something that I learned from my teacher, Gina Salah. It comes from a tantric text called the Sundara Lahari by Shankaracharya, and I did look so that I said it correctly. And I'd love it if, as we wait for people to join the call, you just drop in and listen to the words. Part of why I'm sharing this chant today is, for me, this contains the essence of what Tantra is. O divine Mother, may all my speech and idle talking be mantra. All actions of my hands be mudra. All eating and drinking be as offering of oblations unto thee. All lying down as prostrations unto thee. All pleasures be as dedicating my entire self unto thee. May everything I do, may everything I am be taken as thy worship and love. So welcome to all of you who are just joining us. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I did my best to offer that prayer, which for me is a daily prayer, to welcome in and call in the essence of Tantra. It's actually a little vulnerable for me to do that because the version that my teacher Gina Salah sings, which I'm happy to post for you in the comments later, is so much more honoring and so much more beautiful. So that's my very humble offering. But I want to just start there because I really wanted us to hear, even from this ancient tantric text, like that everything in our lives can be an act of worship, can be an act of puja. The word puja actually means to worship, and an offering to the divine. And my students often hear me saying, we're not hanging out in caves in the Himalayas anymore. Although I did hang out in a cave there when I was in October and did a meditation, which was awesome. But I don't spend most of my life there. Most of my life is in the West. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I want to make meditation as applicable as I possibly can and as integrated as I possibly can in my daily life. So I also want to confess that I'm really nervous to do this topic. It comes up a lot. So glad you're enjoying it, Diane. Thank you. Some of my students are getting on this Facebook Live to encourage me. I appreciate it. Feel free to let the hearts fly to let me know that I'm loved, even as I dance on my own edges. But this is a really big topic that is up for a lot of debate, this inclusion of sexuality and spirituality and how those intersect and what actually is Tantra. Now, I don't want to presume that everything that I'm going to share today is going to encompass the full range of what Tantra is, or that I even have a complete understanding of what Tantra entails. Literally, I believe it's a lifelong study, and any path, especially a deeply spiritual path, we really take this on as a lifelong sadhana or practice. And I'm going to be throwing in some Sanskrit words, one, because I want to really honor the traditions from which this comes, and do my best to actually be bringing in like the Sanskrit words and using words that I've learned about this tradition. My Sanskrit, again, I'm probably going to make a lot of mispronunciations, so please be gentle with me. As I said, I'm still a relatively new student of Sanskrit, and I'm delighted that I'm going to be getting some private lessons soon from Ramana Erickson, who's actually going to teach me to read it properly and improve my pronunciation. So just like I'm encouraging all of you to keep studying, I remain a continuous student too. So I also want to honor that this tradition comes from, at least the way I follow it, comes from India. Some of it comes from Nepal, more Buddhist Tantra, and I tend to practice more in the Hindu lineages. I also want to own that the word Hindu or Hinduism is a Western word that came in with colonization. And the correct term is Sanatana Dharma. So that is actually what we're practicing is Sanatana Dharma, and Tantra is a subsection of that. And I think some of what's got me charged up right now is that in India and actually around the world, including for people like me, we are celebrating a festival called Navaratri. At home, you can all say that, Navaratri. And Navaratri is a 9-day festival celebrating the goddess. And it does celebrate the goddesses in many different forms, but the main goddess that's being celebrated is one of my favorites, Durga. And Durga is amazing. She's all about taking us from fear to empowerment. She helps to slay the ego, and yeah, she's really a pretty powerful goddess in my life. I had a very deep experience with her when I was in India. And today they're actually worshiping Kali, who is kind of one of the more intense forms of Durga, the much more wrathful and vengeful form. She literally is depicted with a garland of skulls around her neck, and she sort of has this bloodthirst. And what I'm noticing is there's a lot of this in not that I'm bloodthirsty, but there's a lot of just like cutting through that which no longer serves and letting go of that which doesn't serve. And I think some of that fire really ignited in me this morning. And I'm continuously pulled into debates. Many of you that follow me on Facebook know that I actually post with a pretty juicy, sexy edge. My newsletter yesterday went out talking about how everybody can learn to have full body orgasms, right? And then today I'm posting all these mantras and I'm talking to you about a tantric text. And I realized there's probably some confusion. Like, what is this woman going on about? Why is she on one hand, like, chanting all these mantras and talking about all these deities, and then on the other hand, talking about sex? And I guess for me, it's because these are one and the same. Happy Navratri, Dilip. Thank you for tuning in. These are really one and the same. And I got into Tantra through something called Neo-Tantra, which is the much more Western form of Tantra. And somebody actually recently said to me, a dear friend said to me, you really shouldn't call it Tantra because that's not what the lineage says. Well, most of my life has been a study of sexuality, and then I discovered Neo-Tantra, which has this focus on sacred sexuality. And the lineages I've studied in, that is their focus. So by focusing on sexuality, that is part of studying and honoring the lineages that I've come from. And more I'm being drawn to study some of the classical lineages of Tantra. And while I'm pretty hungry and ferocious about that, for some of us in the West, that can be a little harder to find. We're living here, at least I'm living in America, and not all of us have access to get to India or even know where to find Indian teachers. And I strongly encourage you to do that if it's at all possible. And I do my best if I'm studying with Westerners to study with the best teachers I can possibly find, many of whom actually have had Indian teachers themselves. So I want to honor that there may be Indian people on this Facebook Live that know much more about this and some of the traditions I'm even speaking of. Thank you. There's a beautiful picture of Durga and a happy Navratri comment in the blessings. Happy Navratri blessings in the comments section if you're joining us on Facebook. Thank you for that, Dilip. But so there are people that are far more knowledgeable about it. But because I'm so public and so out, I get dragged into this conversation all the time. If you guys are curious what Durga looks like, there's some pretty delicious pictures of her being put in the comments by Dilip. You may all want to actually add in and chime in where you are tuning in from today. I know I would certainly love to know. And as part of our global Sangha, as part of our global community of seekers, we can, it'll be great to learn where you're all tuning in from. So yes, there are people far more knowledgeable about these matters than I am. And yet I kind of throw myself in the fire and I teach Tantra and I get a lot of criticism from that. And honestly, a big part of my Dharma feels like building bridges between communities. I do that in the kink community, the BDSM community, and the Tantra community. I bring those together in a class in a puja actually, called a Black Diamond Puja. And this is a neo-tantric puja. I want to own that. We weave elements of classical Tantra in. But it is a Western interpretation of what puja is. And I weave bhakti yoga. Bhakti means the yoga of love or the yoga of devotion. And that's how I first got into a lot of this mantra chanting. I thought it was a totally different kind of yoga, right? So often in the West, we think of yoga just as the ways we twist our bodies up into little pretzels and, nothing wrong with doing asana practice. I think it's great for the body. I should probably do it more. When I do, I feel amazing. But yoga is much bigger than that. It comprises, for example, of bhakti yoga, which is where all this call and response chanting comes from. That's one aspect of it. There is Nada Yoga, which is what I went to India to study, the Tantra of sound and using mantras and using sound to access and activate energy in the body. I'll come to your question in a little while, Nathan, about why I'm criticized. And there is Hatha Yoga, and that's about moving the body and doing these postures. And there is Karma Yoga, which is about selfless service, and Jnana Yoga, which my colleague Julia Tyndall teaches in a lot of our retreats, which is about insight and wisdom yoga and really looking at the shadow and what's holding us back. So there are many forms of yoga, and I like to build bridges between them. And I notice in the bhakti community, it's a lot about something called brahmacharya, where we're trying to overcome and get out of ourselves and overcome our sexuality. And I think there's beauty to that. But as a tantrika, I'm most interested in the non-dual path, where this is the divine. This is my temple. This body is my temple. And so is your body. And so are you equally divine. And I'm interested in reflecting your divinity back to you and seeing the divine in me and seeing the divine in you. So the criticism comes, Nathan, a lot because people tell me often that what I'm teaching isn't Tantra at all. And I want to be clear that I am not a Tantric scholar. I have read English versions of Tantric texts, but my Sanskrit is not yet good enough and maybe never will be to be a Tantric scholar. But I am a Tantrika and a Tantra practitioner, and I teach techniques and tools to activate and awaken the energetic and the physical and the emotional body to help free people from suffering, from dukkha, and help them to moksha or liberation. Okay? And you know, I get criticized because with some of the sex educators, I straddle both being a Tantra teacher and being a sex educator. And with some of the teachers, people tell me I'm being too spiritual, like I'm being too woo-woo, and there's far much focus on spirituality. And then I get the feedback that, no, I'm being far too sexual. And I remember there's a Tantra teacher that actually told me to take me off. She didn't want to be on my mailing list anymore, which again is fine. But because I have a class called Polishing the Penis, Mind-Blowing Techniques of Erotic Massage. And she thought it was totally inappropriate to use the word penis instead of the Sanskrit word lingam. Now, I love lingams. I love them, you know, attached to a body or in beautiful temples like the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi. I worshipped, I think, 8 of them in that temple and offered puja to 8 of them. It was beautiful, right? I love lingams. But we want to take the stigma, or at least I want to take the stigma away from calling it a penis, right? Because that's just as beautiful. And one of my missions in life is to inspire people that even the seemingly profane is sacred. I'm going to say that again. Even the seemingly profane is sacred. So what I'm most interested in is what connects you more deeply to yourself, knowing that God, Goddess lives inside of you, and what connects you more deeply to the divine. And there's so many pathways to that. I've found some pathways that work for me, and that's what inspires and informs my teaching. And thank you, Scott, for saying this is a wonderful and important discussion. I agree, and I appreciate the feedback. But really, what I'm most interested in is what's going to get you connected to God. What's going to get you connected to your highest self and your highest happiness and the most freedom on the planet. And that could be through chanting a mantra. That could be through living a life of renunciation like the brahmacharyas do. If that works for you, great, go ahead and do that. I've actually tried that path a few times in my life. It's never really worked for me. I like to incorporate all of my body in my worship. And when I'm worshiping somebody else's body, either with one of my lovers or in my private Tantra sessions, for me, I'm literally worshiping the body of the divine as the temple, worshiping the body of Krishna as if it's Krishna himself, Krishna or Radha herself before me, right? Literally offering my worship to that body. I don't need my student to hold it that way, but that's at least how I'm holding it. Right, so I'm going to take a breath because I need it. I hope you'll join me wherever you're tuning in from. So I wanted to take a pause and talk a little bit about my teachers. And just as I do that, I want to comment on something Nathan said because I love this being interactive. Nathan says, as far as he's seen, I've studied authentic Tantra and remained true to its core teachings. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that reflection. And, you know, my heart is really in the right place, even if I make mistakes sometimes. And that genuinely is my intention. Again, as I said, if there's something that I misspeak or learn wrong, I'm happy to make a course correction. But my full intention is to share these practices as authentically as I possibly can. And yeah, let's come to the teachers, because that's important. So I've studied with so many different teachers. I'm not going to have time to include all of them in this chat today, but I want to start by honoring my teacher, Gina Salah. Gina grew up in the Shivananda yoga tradition. She grew up in ashrams, actually all around the world. And one of the things I adore about Gina Salah is that the main thing that she's preaching is love. She calls it capital L love. And another one of my teachers, Krishna Das, also does the same thing. He's like, get back to love, come back to that place of love inside of yourself. And that's mostly what I'm tapping into when I practice Neo-Tantra, which is mostly what I practice. But God Goddess is also that place of love inside of ourselves. And when we chant mantra, for example, that is the way of reconnecting, plugging right back into the divine. When we eye gaze with somebody in a neo-tantric puja, for example, that's a way of seeing the divine in each other. There's a Sanskrit word that many of you may know, namaste. And namaste means, I honor the divine in you that is also in me, that place of truth in you that also resides in me, and the light in you that also burns brightly in me. So I honor my teacher, Gina Salah, here. I want to jump across the spectrum because Gina is like a lineage Tantra teacher. And I had the privilege when I was in India with her of studying with some incredible Tantric and Sanskrit scholars. I got the pleasure to study with Dr. Shastriji and have some master classes with him. And what was so interesting, this is, I actually don't know how old he is, but I think he's like an 80-year-old, at least 80-year-old man. And he kind of, his hair comes out here. And, you know, you walk in and he's got pictures of the goddesses everywhere. And that was really exciting to me because I got that from Bhakti Yoga. That's what inspired me to do the mantras and get into the goddesses. And it wasn't until I was in India that I realized in the West, mostly people talk about Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva and Shakti are awesome. But there are so many more goddesses that we can call on and have access to. And in the real tantric traditions, in the classical tantric traditions, they actually do talk about these gods and goddesses a lot. Durga, who I referenced earlier today, she rules the Kundalini Shakti. She rules the whole power that fuels the entire universe. And that certainly is part of moving this sexual energy up inside of ourselves, right? So Durga is very tantric. So when you hear me going on about her, for me, she plugs right into Tantra. But when I was sitting in this masterclass with Dr. Vastraji, it was so interesting. He talked actually about ejaculation control and mastery. And he was speaking in English, and English is not his first language. So I thought perhaps I was misunderstanding what he was saying because we were there studying classical Tantra. And after class, I asked Gina, I said, did I misunderstand that? Or was he talking about withholding the seed and how to do that? And she said, no, you're correct. And she has been studying with him for many years and has never heard him talk about that aspect. But I think because he tapped into my work as a dakini in Neo-Tantra is a hands-on sexual healer. And teaching ejaculation control and mastery is one of the things I love teaching. So interesting how even sitting in India, in Varanasi, one of the most holy cities in India, it's reputedly one of the oldest cities in the world. Even there, I had the Indian teachers meeting me where I was at and talking about withholding this, holding the seed and not ejaculating. So there's honoring Gina Salah and Dr. Shastriji. I want to jump across the spectrum and honor a wonderful teacher of mine, Barbara Corellis. Some of you may know her through her book and the main focus of her teachings, Urban Tantra. I'll post some of these links in the comments below so you can find them afterwards. But Barbara's amazing. She was one of the people in the neo-tantric world that helped me break out of the confines of what Tantra has to be. She incorporates both tantric practice and BDSM, which often don't go together. But if we're looking at ways to connect and play with energy, a lot of the ways that we play with either power exchange or impact play, for example, when you're delivering a spanking, and I know I'm dancing right on the edge of super controversial things now. Yes, when you deliver a spanking, you're putting a lot of energy in the body. And for people that are into that, it can be, I'm just going to fix my nose ring. It can be a very honoring and very loving thing to do. If that doesn't float your boat, no worries. No worries at all. Then you find another energetic practice. You know, I use mantras, for example. And just yesterday I was working with a student chanting bija mantras. Bija mantras, that's sort of what we know them in the West, in Neo-Tantra. Bija is the seed sound. And it actually comes from, it's a very simple form of a Bhutta Shuddhi practice, which again, I studied in India, in classical Tantra. And this Bhutta Shuddhi practice is about clearing out the chakras or the energy centers. And for those of you who want a quick Sanskrit lesson, it's not chakra, it's chakra with a chakra. And I love using the Sanskrit because I'm an energy geek. And Ramana Erickson, that Sanskrit teacher I told you about earlier, he's taught us that when we get the Sanskrit pronunciation correct, we actually activate the petals of the lotus. The petals of the lotus is in these chakras and they vibrate. The letters of the Sanskrit alphabet help them vibrate. So we get extra Shakti activation, extra energetic activation. I'm trying to keep up with all your wonderful comments, you guys. And Nathan, I love it what you're saying. If I changed the name of my Polishing the Penis workshop, I'd have to call it Laundering the Lingam. I think that's pretty cute. I don't think I'm going to change the subject. But, you know, the reason I don't use lingam in the title is because there are a lot of people outside of the Tantra world that have never tried it before. And I have lots of new students in my classes that would have no idea what a lingam is. So putting lingam in the title doesn't invite them in. Doesn't invite them in at all. My whole journey into Tantra started with some really good sex. I met somebody, I'm actually going to out him because I love honoring him. I consider him one of my original teachers, Reed Mahelko, who wasn't necessarily teaching me Tantra, but he was teaching me something called energetic sex, which is related to Tantra. In my opinion, energetic sex is a little more goal-focused and a little less ritual. And I'm a big proponent of ritual, and I like bringing in the spirituality. So I prefer to practice Tantra and let go of the goal. But, you know, my first entry into this world was through Red Tantra, which involves sacred sexuality. And that's taken me all the way to India to go and sit with these Indian gurus, right? And has me chanting on this festival of Navaratri to Durga, right? And to buying a harmonium and to sitting at my altar every day and to offering these practices and studying with people far more knowledgeable than myself. You know, I went to Jaya Uttal's Kirtan camp to really help myself get steeped into more of bhakti yoga. I feel there's a very powerful transmission when I sit with Krishna Das, especially when we chant in his kirtans. You really feel the transmission from his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And again, mostly what Maharaji, what Neem Karoli Baba was teaching was love. Like, let's come back to love. Let's connect more into love. Let's connect more to the devotion. And those are the things that are really important to me. So I've also studied with a wonderful asana teacher called Pedro Franco, who's Brazilian. He is more of a classical tantrika, and he teaches a lot of the things I teach, but through the lens of asana. And as far as I know in his teachings, he isn't focusing on sacred sexuality because honestly, a lot of, most of the teachings in India don't focus on that. They don't. And I actually came back from India with a lot of shame going, oh, am I doing the wrong thing? Maybe I've got it all wrong. And what I realized is that in the West, there's so much suppression of sexuality. And when you dangle a carrot around better sex for people in the West, they actually start paying attention. And I know I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm really quite fine with that. There are people that are not destined to be most of my students. No one teacher works for everybody, so you've got to find the teachers that work and resonate for you, just as I have. But yeah, I use I use the lens of sexuality to help invite people into a deeper practice. Something I often say when I'm teaching class is I'll say to people, who's interested in learning to quadruple their orgasm? And almost every hand goes up in the room, they're interested in that. And literally you can do that with breath and sound. There are techniques you come to one of my private sessions, I can help you do that in the first session. I'll help you expand and redefine what orgasm even is and give you many more options for what that can look like. As you can see, I get excited about talking about orgasms myself. But literally through the breath, you can quadruple your orgasm. And in the West, we don't tend to breathe. So I dangled this carrot, which is true. If you do the pranayama, if you do the breathwork practice, then you can learn to do that. And then we go into a breathwork practice. And then we chant a mantra to invoke a particular deity and to invoke particular energetics. And now we're starting to weave. The word Tantra actually means to weave as if on a loom. Right? It also means a tantric text, which is why I started this video singing from a tantric text. One of my definitions of Tantra is about getting out of your head and into your body. One of my other teachers, Margot Anand, calls it the rocket ship to enlightenment. And Margot Anand, I really enjoy the style of Tantra she teaches. If I'm understanding correctly, and please forgive me, Margot, if I'm expressing this wrong, but I believe it's through the Buddhist Tantric lineage that she teaches, because it's Padmasambhava, and then there's another lineage name I'm not remembering now. But Margot studied and was actually with Osho, Rajneesh, when he was in his body in India. And Osho is often described as the person who started Neo-Tantra, who understood that Westerners needed, and he's very controversial too, just so you know. If you Google him, you'll see a lot of controversial stuff. In fact, for me, he's also controversial. I haven't made up my mind about Osho either, but so many of my teachers have ended up studying with him. And Margot was with Osho when he was in the body. And if you look at her and my teachers, Deborah Pramal and Miten, there was a very powerful transmission that came from Osho. Very powerful transmission. He took people to a deep, very deep place. And he had a strong Shaktipat. He had a strong activation in his energy field. Margot tells a story. You can read about it in her book, Love, Sex, and Awakening. It's a very easy read, great book, really fun. It's an autobiography about her life and journey into Tantra. But she talks about this day with Osho when she was sitting for darshan, this viewing or this audience of the guru or the deity. And she was sitting with him, and I can't remember if he just looked at her or smiled at her or touched her third eye, but she burst out laughing uncontrollably for hours and hours and hours. She had to eventually be carried out of the hall because she couldn't even walk. She was laughing so hard. And for a month, every day at the same time, I think it was 5 o'clock, at the same time, every day, no matter where she was or what she was doing, she would burst out laughing uncontrollably again, just feeling the Shakti or the activation from Osho. So, I'm most interested in practices that I see bearing fruits, that I see actually have an impact on people's lives. I'm not too attached to which practices you do, as long as they're beneficial. And mostly, I want to see, do they get you more connected to yourself, the divine, and if we're practicing Neo-Tantra, to your partner. Because really, as we walk around the world, we want to be seeing the divine in each other. We want to be celebrating the best in each other. I want to tell you a little story about how I got into this practice of chanting, of kirtan. And it's actually, I'm including it because it's another great example of how very Western style got me into a much more traditional practice of bhakti yoga. So for those of you that are familiar with Northern California, I was at Harbin Hot Springs, a beautiful hot springs a couple of hours north of the Bay Area. And there was actually some guy chatting me up. I won't out who it is, but if you're watching, I'm still smiling. And thank you for the incredible gift. And he said to me, do you want to go to kirtan? And I said, to what? I don't know what kirtan is. And he said, chanting. And I said, oh, I love chanting. I had picked up a book years ago in London by another one of Neem Crawley Baba's devotees, Lama Surya Das, who has followed the Buddhist tradition. And I learned my first mantra there. It's actually the name of my whole business. The mantra is Om Mane Padme Hum, which means the jewel is in the lotus. One of the simplest translations of that mantra is that it takes both wisdom and compassion to bring us to enlightenment. So now you know why I named my business. First mantra I learned. But I would just like find random mantras and like make up. I'd kind of been into Gregorian chants in college. So I would just make up my own tunes to the mantras. And here I am years later in Northern California, a long way from where I grew up in South Africa, having somebody inviting me to come and chant with a group of people. And that night was with a very Western kirtanwala. She played harmonium, but she also played on her guitar. It was the first time I chanted those bija mantras that I talked about, those seed sounds, seed mantras for the chakras. Chakras, for those of you who don't yet know, are wheels or energy centers in the body. And if that's far too woo for you, then just think of them as nerve ganglions, because they're nerve clusters where all the chakras, where all of the chakras are. These nerve clusters are connected. And anyway, this was a pretty Western kirtan. You know, she happens to be a hatha yoga teacher as well. And but it was a very Western introduction. And nowadays, I tend to go to super traditional. Like a lot of my friends are Amma devotees and are really into, or they Vaishnavas and hang out in the ISKCON or Hare Krishna tradition. I'm not a member of ISKCON, but I have many friends that are. And I'm just attracted to devotion. I'm just attracted to people that want to get more connected to God and who open me up to get more connected to myself. And so these days, like you'll notice, I posted some mantras on Facebook today. It's like a desperately trying to learn, called the Mahishasura Mardini Stotram, which is in honor of the goddess Durga. There she is again. She's my favorite, so I talk about her a lot. But, you know, it's pretty complicated now. I can't even say all the words, even though I've taken classes on it. And it's kind of this ongoing practice, the sadhana to even learn it. But when I first heard this, it was actually Pragnya Vieira. Love you, Pragnya. You got me super excited about this stotram, about this chant. And so I geeked out. I'm really confessing today, but I geeked out, and I would like sit in my bedroom with like the words in front of me and desperately try and get my mouth around the tongue twisters. And more than a year later now, I'm starting to get a little better. But, you know, I was just singing it on my own, totally by myself, because, you know, it's kind of hard in the West to learn about these traditions in many ways. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are teachers if you want to find them. And teachers that aren't waving their flags saying that they're practicing Tantra. You actually have to dig a little deeper. Amma teaches, Amma, the hugging saint, Maha Amrit Ananda Mahima, teaches a tantric tradition. And there are other teachers that come to California even, or all around the world, that you can go and learn with if you want to learn lineage tantra. Gina Salah, for example, teaches lineage tantra, and I strongly recommend you check her out, even though she's a Westerner. I want to just divert for a minute and say, I have had friends say to me that, no, you couldn't possibly have taken a diksha or transmission mantra from a white person, and you couldn't possibly call that person your guru or your teacher. The word guru means moving from darkness to light. You couldn't possibly do this, right? I don't think God's that confined. I don't think God is that confined that we have to look at the color of our skin to decide which teacher we should study from. Of course, if people have grown up with this tradition, they have a huge leg up and probably have so much to teach us. So yes, go and study with Indian teachers directly as much as you can. But if your teacher ends up coming in form with white skin, or yellow skin, or green skin, or pink skin, or whatever skin, don't just throw out the messenger. There could be lots of value there too. So coming back to Ammaji. So I last got the pleasure of sitting with Amma during a big puja, big celebration. And this is a big tantric puja in honor of, my understanding is it's in honor of Durga, or maybe Kali. So forgive me if I'm missaying that. But she comes to California. She has an ashram in San Ramon, for those of you that want to go and find her and study with her. And I went to this puja called Devi Bhava. And it's literally about, the bhav is like the feeling, and soaking up the feeling, so much bigger than the word feeling. But anyway, the whole feeling and the emotion of the goddess. And literally Amma starts, she does a little teaching at 8 o'clock, and I think the darshan, which is where you go and get a hug from Amma, starts at about 9 p.m. And she carries on without taking a break until 9 a.m. the next morning. And she's embracing people. She embraces the world, right? She goes around embracing millions of people. And she does around the world throughout the year. And she does thousands that night, and they just keep coming, right? Even when you get there earlier, you wait like a few hours before you can actually get to the front of the line to receive your hug or your darshan with her. And this time, for the very first time, I decided to stay to the end. And when I say stay to the end, I was there till like 10 a.m. the next morning. But I stayed because they were chanting this mantra. They were chanting this Mahishasura Mardini Stotram. 1,200 people were sitting there chanting this mantra. And part of why I stayed was I was so eager to get to chant this beloved mantra with people that were just as passionate about it than I was, instead of sitting at my altar or sitting in my bedroom by myself with the words, on a piece of paper or on the computer screen and just chanting with the machine. I wanted to chant with other devotees. So I'm sharing some of my path in a very haphazard way because I didn't plan all of this out. It's kind of coming out free form. But to say a lot of my path started out with very Western. It came from, somebody inviting me on a date to a kirtan. And then, in terms of the sacred sexuality, around having some really good sex with a guy at a camp that I went to, right? And I was like, wow, what is this? I need to know more about this. And it's led me on a really deep path to do my best to get back to the origins of these teachings, to learn as much as I can, and to keep learning and to keep being a student. Even though I teach Tantra, I am still a student of Tantra. I am learning every day. So I'm going to make time in a few moments for a few questions. If you guys have questions, and you can start putting those in the comments below. But my strong invitation for everybody who watches this video, let's come back to love. Not as a spiritual bypass, but as a spiritual practice. That's what my Guruji Jina encourages me to do. How can you choose love? That's what Neem Karoli Baba encourages us to do. How can we keep the focus on God, Goddess, whether you see it outside of yourself in the form of a murti or a statue, or the mantra is the goddess herself. Or whether we're seeing God, Goddess inside of each other. That's where I'd love the debate to be. That's where I'd love the focus to be. That's where I'd love our habit of attention to be. That's where I want my focus to be. So I invite you over the next few days on Facebook, and if you're not already connected to me on Facebook, please do. I want you to notice what I'm posting. See what resonates for you. If I'm not the right teacher for you, I'm totally fine with that. I am not everybody's cup of tea. Go and find somebody who is. Maybe it's not even Tantra. That is your practice. Maybe it's something else. I hear that people get a lot out of doing Vipassana, 10-day silent, sitting still meditation. Go and do that. Go and do whatever works for you. I have somebody, part of my inner circle, and his bhakti yoga, when he gets into his devotion, is when he's climbing on rocks in Joshua Tree or in Sedona, right? Find your bhakti, find your devotion in the world, and come back to that. So I'm literally just going to give a few more moments for questions. So if you have a burner, please do pop it in. I'd love it if you send some love my way, because it's been a little bit edgy to talk about today, because I know it's a very controversial subject, bringing sexuality and spirituality together. For me, it's right on topic with my Dharma, because I do believe in building bridges. And I notice, for example, in the Bhakti Yoga community, even though what they're preaching, a lot of what's being said is about brahmacharya and overcoming sexuality, they come and tell me their stories. And I'm honored and I'm grateful that I'm a safe place and a safe haven to talk about sexuality. Because I believe we incarnated into this human form so we could have a divine experience here on earth. And so we can live divinity through every breath and every touch and every taste and every word. And I have a long way to get that practice perfect, just so you know. So yeah, feel free to let the hearts fly if you've appreciated this video. If you haven't yet put in, thank you, Nathan. Thanks for the love. If you haven't yet put in where you tuned in from, I would love to know. And I'm going to do my best even after this video to answer any questions you have. I will pop some of the links that I've mentioned in the comments below. And yeah, if you are interested, this is actually really important. If you are interested in actually seeing what I teach, as opposed to looking from the outside in and criticizing, if you're interested in knowing what I teach, come and be in one of my classes. Come and experience what I'm actually offering instead of just telling me I'm doing it wrong. I won't out him, but there's a particular Sanskrit scholar that has sent me cease and desist letters telling me I should not be tarnishing the name of Tantra by calling what I do Tantra, and I should stop teaching Tantra immediately. And I said to him, come to my class, please. Come to my class. This is not available for everybody, but for him, I actually said, I'll even comp you in to the class, because he was so openly and publicly critical. I said, come and see what I teach, and then let's have a chat again. And he never did. So my invite to you, even if you're skeptical, come and check it out. Come and see what I'm actually teaching. And let's see where that nourishes you and nurtures you from there. So I'm sending you lots of love and blessings from my heart to yours. And thank you so much for tuning in. It's really such a blessing when I mentioned on Facebook I might talk on this topic that you were interested and enthusiastic about what I had to say. And for those of you that are interested in knowing when I have a Facebook Live, I know there's a way you can subscribe actually to get notifications. I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but I think there's an option at the end of this Facebook Live to do that as well. Because I love posting lots of videos, both of myself and of other people, to really help and encourage and inspire you on your path, whether you get to be with me in person in class or we just connect on the airwaves for now. In my view, Tantra is a transmission practice, and the ways to get the best out of the practice is really to be in the room with your teacher or teachers. And so I look forward to the gift of your presence very, very soon. Namaste, and have a beautiful day.